Hey y'all, my name is Stephen Karate, and today I'm going to be talking, or for this video, I'm going to be talking about Chapter 4 of Christopher Howard's Thinking Like a Political Scientist. So in this chapter is really interesting because in this one, Howard really gets into how do you go about doing your research. What are the different methods you can use and kind of what are the pros and cons of each of those. So kind of the main areas that you can do this that he talks about are experiments and observational design, and also kind of similar to observational design, you also have case studies. So all of these have their own pros and cons, which he talks about, and it's really well outlined in the book. But yeah, let's dive into the 3 review exercises. So the first thing I wanted to have y'all do was explain what the difference is between plain surveys and a survey experiment. So I asked this question because I want to ensure that you guys have a good understanding of what makes an experiment an experiment. So with a survey experiment, it's necessary that you have some kind of treatment and that you have all the people taking the surveys divided into different treatment and control groups to ensure that you can see how this treatment is affecting the dependent variable of how they respond to these surveys. If you just have people all respond to the same surveys and just look at their responses across the board, you can get some really good information from that, but that's not an experiment because you're not manipulating anything to kind of see how an independent variable as it shifts will impact a dependent variable. For the next question, I wanted to have you guys talk about what was one area of study that might be more conducive to a time series examination and what might be more conducive to a cross-sectional examination. So a time series, that's really something that's really good to see over time. So like if you want to evolve how something has kind of trended throughout history, that's a really good kind of design to use. I think one thing that's really good to use if you want to look at, for instance, how poverty rates have shifted in a city over time, you could look at what the poverty rate has been year after year after year and see how that shifted. And you could maybe compare that with some kind of independent variable such as what party was in charge or how many people were moving in versus moving out. And then also you could do, for cross-sectional design, that's where you want to look at a bunch of different things at the same time to see kind of how they compare to each other. So what you might want to do here is like compare different zip codes in a neighborhood to see what their poverty rate is and maybe how that compares to a different independent variable that you might be interested in, such as average employment rate or anything like that. And actually, you can actually combine the two of these to kind of get the best of both worlds. Lastly, so I asked y'all to give a brief overview of the idea of process tracing and how you could do that for a case study on food insecurity in a specific neighborhood. So one thing I want to consider if I'm doing this is what are all the different mechanisms that have led to the way that what we're examining now, how it is what it is. So what I might look at, for instance, are zoning regulations. I might look at political representation. I might look at social capital that's been afforded these neighborhoods over time. I might look at kind of how the economic conditions as a whole have evolved. I might look at who's moving in and who's moving out, and like how does that correspond with when kind of food insecurity or when kind of access to fresh and nutritious food started to dwindle or started to increase. So all of this is looking at how the different factors over a long period of time and how they kind of stacked on each other to create what we see today. So those are the 3 review exercises for Chapter 4. Those are my sample answers. Thank you so much for listening to me. I'm excited to see you for Chapter 5.